and the persistent pink stockings, the Sandman closed the mouth of Mrs. O'Flynn's sack and swung it on his shoulder, nodding to the children to watch what would happen. Much excited, they crowded round the open door in the side of the big rock and peered down into what seemed to be a kind of dark well with a toboggan slide descending into it. Sandy placed the Wash Lady's sack at the top of the slide, and before the children could so much as wink it had slid off into the darkness and disappeared from sight. "Oh, my!" cried Ann. "Is it a shoot-the-chutes? Does it bump when it gets there?" "No, no," said the Sandman. "No bumps whatsoever. The most comfortable kind of traveling I know. In fact, you're there the same time you start, and I'd like to know how you can beat that. I ought to know, for I use this route myself on my rounds a little earlier in the evening." He walked back to his pile of sacks and picked up another of them. "Now then," said he, examining the label, "who's next? Ah, Miss Jane Mackenzie." The children could hardly believe their ears. "Oh, Rudy," whispered Ann in Rudolf's ear, "what kind of dreams do you suppose Aunt Jane will get?" "Shh! Listen, he's going to tell us," answered Rudolf. The Sandman was gravely consulting his list. "Mm-hm. Cook that likes living in the country. Step this way, ma'am, and don't take any more room than you can help. New non-fadable, cheap but elegant parlor curtains. One able-bodied, intelligent gardener with a generous disposition. Hurry the gentleman forward, boys. He's a curiosity. What's next? Aha! One niece, 2 nephews, 3 perfectly good children." Sandy paused, stared about him at the throng of jumping, pushing dreams, then added, "Don't see 'em." "Why, yes, you do." Ann was pulling impatiently at the Sandman's sleeve. "Here you are." Then she turned to Rudolf and whispered excitedly, "Don't you see? We must make the Sandman believe we are Aunt Jane's good dreams, and then he'll send us back to her." "I'd like a ride on that slide, all right," returned Rudolf. "But I doesn't want to go back to Aunt Jane yet," came the voice of Peter clearly from behind them. "I shan't go till I've seen the Bad Dreams." "Nonsense!" Rudolf turned round on him angrily. "Of course you'll go. You're the youngest, and you've got to mind us." And then, without paying any more attention to Peter, Rudolf thrust himself in front of the Sandman. "Here we are," he said. "We're all ready." The Sandman looked the boy up and down, consulted his list again, smiled, and shook his head very doubtfully. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I'm afraid you don't exactly answer. Just listen to this," and he read aloud. "Number 1. Boy, polite and gentlemanly in manner. Brown hair neatly smoothed and parted. Eton suit. Clean white collar. Boots well polished. Latin grammar under arm." He stopped. Rudolf, in his pajamas, with his ruffled locks, tin sword, and angry expression, did not answer very closely to this description. The cook who liked living in the country, the gardener with a generous disposition, and several other Good Dreams burst out laughing. Only the False Hare kept a solemn expression, but Rudolf knew very well what that meant. The Sandman continued. "Number 2. Little girl, modest and timid in her manners, not apt to address her elders until spoken to. Hair braided neatly and tied with blue ribbon, white apron over dark dress. Doing patchwork with a pleased expression, has not forgotten thimble." Here Sandy was interrupted by the cook and the gardener, who declared that if he didn't stop they'd die a-laughing, that they would. The False Hare wiped away a tear, and none of the dreams seemed to consider the description correct. Sandy shook his head again as he glanced at Ann in her nighty, her ruffled curls tumbling over her flushed face. Ann without patchwork thimble or pleased expression. "Afraid you won't do, miss," said he, looking quite sorry for her. "Let's see what's next. Number 3," he read. "Very small boy. Clean blue sailor suit. White socks. Looks sorry for—" All turned to look at Peter, but Peter was not looking sorry for anything. Peter was not there. Ann gave a hasty look all round the glade, then burst into tears. "Oh, Rudolf," she cried, "what shall we do? He's gone. He's slipped away to find those Bad Dreams all by himself. You know how Peter is. When he says he's going to do anything, he will do it. Oh, oh, I ought to have watched him." "Don't cry," said Rudolf hastily. "It's just as much my fault. You stay here and I'll go fetch him back. I have my sword, you know." "No, no," sobbed Ann. "Don't leave me. It was my fault. I promised mother I would always look after Peter. We'll go together. The Sandman will tell us where the Bad Dreams live. Won't you?" she added, turning to Sandy. "There, there, of course I will," said the little man kindly. "I'd go along with you if there wasn't such a press of business just now, but you can see for yourselves what a mess things would be in if I should leave. You must go right ahead, right into the thick of the woods. Follow that path on the other side of the glade. You needn't be afraid you'll miss those Bad Ones. They'll be on the lookout for you, I'm afraid." The children thanked Sandy for all his kindness and turned to leave him. "One moment," he cried, and he ran ahead of them to draw aside the wall of prickly bushes and show them the little path he had spoken of, which wound from the Good Dreams glade toward the heart of the wood. "Keep right on," said Sandy, "and don't be afraid. Remember, they're a queer lot, those fellows, but they can't hurt you if you are careful. Don't answer 'em back, and don't ask 'em too many questions. One thing in particular, if they offer you anything to eat, don't taste a mouthful of it. If you do, it'll be the worse for you." Rudolf and Ann thought of Peter and his passion for refreshments, and they started hastily forward. "Just one thing more," called Sandy after them, "about that consignment of your aunt's, you know. I'll hold that over till you get back, and we'll see what can be done. Maybe we can fit you in yet, somehow. Now good-bye and good luck to you." "Good-bye and thank you," Rudolf and Ann called back to him, and then they plunged into the path. The wall of bushes sprang back again behind them and cut them off from the shelter of the Good Dreams glade. As the path was very narrow, Rudolf walked first, sword drawn, and Ann trotted behind him, trying not to think of what queer things might be waiting behind the trees to jump out at them, trying only to think of her naughty Peter and how glad she would be to see him again. End of chapter 11.